Welcome back, everyone. I'd like to welcome today's guest to the podcast. We're here today at Southport and Ainsdale Golf Club, and I'm sat with a man who's played in 5 Open Championships. He's won an Italian Open Championship, amongst other things that we'll go into. I'd like to welcome Jim Payne. Nice to see you, Jim. Thanks for letting us come down.
Thank you, no problem.
Yeah, so we're just at this moment, Jim, looking out over the course. It's not a bad job that you've got these days, away from the golf, but still involved in the golf here as the professional at Southport and Ainsdale.
Yeah, it's good. It's a great place to be. I've been here for 22 years now. But this time of year, a lot of golf courses are struggling really with the wet and the winter. But here we stay pretty good and open and dry, and people are playing, as you can see, today in February, so we're good really.
Yeah. Where for yourself, Jim, because you were born in Lincolnshire. How, as sort of a child growing up, what was how did it become golf for you? What was...
Well, where I lived was on a small, in a village really on the east coast called Sandylands, which is near Skegness. And it's a good few years ago now, 40 years ago, but things were different, and there was a little golf course in the village, and that was pretty much all you did. If you lived in that village, everyone played golf. There wasn't the distraction of other stuff like there is now.
Yeah.
So if you weren't at school, you were on the golf course really, and there was quite a few juniors. My dad played there, and he was the sort of driving force really, but it was just something that everyone in the village did, and you just kept getting better and wanting to beat the others, and kept going at it really, kept improving.
Yeah. And at what sort of point did you start to think this could be the sport for me? I'm pretty good at this.
Well, I always wanted to be, but I think when you're young, you sort of think that's what I want to be. I want to be a golfer, I want to be a footballer, I want to be a sportsman or whatever. So it was a bit of a dream. Only when you get a bit older do you think seriously about it, when you start to think about leaving school, I guess, really. But I knew I had to keep improving every year, and if I hadn't kept improving, I would have done something else. But I did improve year on year. I won different things and bigger things and better things, and then leaving school after A-levels, I had to decide what I was going to do. And the guys, there were some men who owned the golf club, and they sort of sponsored me for 2 years because it was, I wanted to play golf, and they wanted me to because I was, helping their club a bit as well at the time. But so they helped me for 2 years financially, and that still kept improving. And by the end of those 2 years, I was turning pro and starting on the European tour really. So it was just this thing about progression really. I know if I'd had a bad year and gone backwards, I would have stopped really. Stopped pursuing it anyway. But every year led to something else, so I just kept going.
I'm sort of speaking from being a keen golfer myself, but a poor one at that. But what sort of hours of practice was you putting in them sort of late teens, that after your college or your schooling?
Well, in those days it was after school I'd bike to the club and maybe play 9 holes or practice for 2 hours. At the weekends I would play every day and maybe practice a bit as well. When I left school and golf was just the thing that I did, I'd probably practice for 6 hours a day. So I treated it like a job. It wasn't my job, and it was what I wanted to do, and somebody gave me the chance to do that. So but it was different then, and it was better then because you didn't know what everyone else was doing. You didn't have the internet, you didn't have the phone, there wasn't much golf on TV really, so you just thought you had to be working harder than everyone else. But you didn't know what they were doing, but you just thought, well, if I work for as long as I can, I'm going to be better than other people. And then you turn up at a tournament and see other people and play golf with other people and sort of hopefully win. But these days you sort of everyone's comparing themselves with someone else or somebody else's swing, or what fitness are they doing, what are they doing to mentally prepare. But in those days you just did the best for you because that's all you had access to really.
We've spoke about it quite in depth on the podcast with the other guests that I've had on, from a variety of different sports, football, rugby league, whatever it is. And we've mentioned how much it has had an impact on every sport, social media now. And you see, near enough majority of probably tour players will have like a social media manager or a team that are, you know, and it's phenomenal, really, like to see that. But I just wanted to talk about really 1991, so we're not far from it where we're sat now, from Birkdale. You're playing the Open Championships at Birkdale. How was that for you? Because I know it must have been, from the outside looking in, and I know that you played the final round with Jack.
You've spoken my story now before I've even started. But no, it's ironic really, because in those days I had no links to Southport at all. I lived in Lincolnshire, and the fact that I'm here now is coincidence really. But it happened that the Open was at Birkdale, and I had to pre-qualify. I was an amateur, so in a way that took the pressure off really, because I wasn't playing for money, I was just playing for the experience. But I managed to qualify at West Lancs, that was the biggest achievement really, was getting through the qualification into the Open. So as soon as you're in the Open, the whole week becomes, you know, the biggest thing you've played in, and I'm going to enjoy it really. But I'd done well as an amateur. I was playing well. I'd had a good season, and the Open was a bit of a bonus. And I started off well, played the first 2 rounds well enough to make the cut. There's only one other amateur who made the cut, and that was Phil Mickelson, who's done all right since.
Yeah, not bad.
And third round, I can't remember who I played with in the third round, but the fourth round, I had to phone at night to get my tee times for the final round. You had to walk up to a phone box and phone the RNA at 9 o'clock at night to check what your tee time was and who you're playing with. So I phoned them from the phone box, and they said, yeah, you're playing at 11 tomorrow morning with Jack Nicklaus. So that was it. I went back to the restaurant that we were in, and it was my dad and a few other friends were there. So that was, it made the event for them as well, really, because they were probably more aware of Jack Nicklaus from a few years previous than I was. I was only 21 at the time. So Jack Nicklaus was the best player in the world, but he'd probably had his best years. So, he was still good, but not his very best. So that was that. The Sunday was a full 18 holes in the final day of the Open with Jack Nicklaus, and I was amateur. The main thing I was bothered about was beating Phil Mickelson, really. I wasn't playing with him, but he was out just in front of me. But you get a silver medal if you lead an amateur, so...
That's right.
Nicklaus was very, very good all the way around. He was helpful, encouraging, and he got a standing ovation onto every green and every tee. And at the end of the day, I shot 70, which was a good round. I'd played well. Glad it was finished, and then handed my card in, and I could see that Phil Mickelson had shot 74, so I won the silver medal.
Now, I knew that you won the silver medal, but I didn't know that you picked Phil Mickelson to it. So, I mean, that's a feat in itself, isn't it, really? Yeah.
No, it's been interesting. And, I mean, it's a long time ago, but I can remember all of it. But actually, something happened last year. There's a member here called Dr. David Marsh, who's a famous amateur golfer, and he's done everything in amateur golf and for the RNA. And he died last year. But as it happened, another coincidence, he was captain of the RNA in the same year that in 1991. So he presented the prizes at the Open on the 18th green. Ian Baker Finch was the winner. I was the leading amateur. So several people have brought in pictures over the last few months. Wow. Because of the David Marsh connection. So I've seen pictures recently that I haven't ever seen before, that I'd never seen at all.
So you've got like 30 odd years gone by, and then all of a sudden you see these pictures that you've never... Yeah.
I mean, I'd seen one or two that I'd got myself, but there are others from other people that have taken them themselves, or they've been hidden away or something. So it's quite interesting, really, and another reminder of what was happening at that time. Yeah,
and you said about Jack going round. I mean, for people that don't play golf, like when you've got football, it's a 90-minute game and a team game. When you've got 18 holes, it's quite intricate, isn't it? It's, you know, there's only you and him and your caddies or whatever out there.
Yeah.
That must have been fascinating for a good few hours, just to try and keep on your game and that, but also you're playing with, well, he's the greatest of all time in terms of what he's won.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if I'm being honest, it was all good. From the first tee onwards, he was brilliant. If I'd sat down with him in a room, I'd have asked him 50 questions. But when you're on the golf course, you're that involved in, well, first of all, trying not to hit the spectators with your own ball. Partly sort of standing in the right place at the right time, and obviously doing your best. So you're concentrating on your score, you're nervous. There's that many things going on. You know, I asked him a few things, and he was brilliant, and he asked me a few things. He was very encouraging, but then you finish, and you know it goes in a blur. Really, the 4 hours of the round of golf goes in a blur. The main thing, honestly, I remember about him was that we'd finished, and I'm thinking, you know, I'm really pleased with myself. I've shot 70. I just want to hand my card in and go and see my family and get ready for the presentation and and he'd shot 72, I think, on the same, and it took him an age to sign his card, and he checked it and he double checked it, and then he called his caddy in to check his card, and it took honestly 15 minutes for him to verify his own card, and it didn't mean anything. It was like he was going to finish 40th in the Open, which meant nothing to him. But I said to him afterwards, I said, you just take forever to. I said, I'm surprised how long you've taken with that. And he said, I've never been disqualified, and he said, I never will be. And he said, I've spent 4 hours out there putting a score together, and I'm not going to lose it by making a mistake on my card.
Wow.
So that was a lesson in itself, really.
I think when you see sort of the top end sports people, they just have these standards, don't they, and principles that they live by, and it's quite incredible, that, really. But afterwards, because I mean, if I have a good round, I have a drink, and if I have a bad round, I have a drink to commiserate myself. But how was it afterwards? Did you need a strong drink, or was it just a great presentation and you wanted to sort of memorise it?
No, it's a presentation, and then you go home. I remember, an hour after the presentation, we're on the road, M62 back to Lincolnshire, and it's a bit of you've been, it's been a buzz all week, really, and all of a sudden it's gone. You might stop somewhere and have a drink or a burger on the way home. Yeah. But you're back to real life, really. Yeah. And the following week, I remember I wasn't playing anything the following week, so it was just a week at home. And it's, you can see how people sometimes struggle with that, really, because you're on a high for 5 or 6 days, and then it falls back to absolute reality. Yeah. But at that, I was only 21. I wasn't a drinker. I was trying to be a sportsman, and I was all I was bothered about was maybe the next tournament in a couple of weeks' time or something.
Mm. And as it moved on, you go on to the European tour, as it was as a professional. Starting off on that, was that nervy in terms of you've off the back of the Open Championship, but now you're a professional, it means a bit more? Would that be fair to say?
It meant everything, really. I was trying to be a professional, and this was what I'd played amateur golf to become a pro, to hopefully make a living out of playing golf, really, and win tournaments. So it was the end of 1991, and I had to go to the tour school to get onto the tour, which I got through. And then the start of 92 was my first tournaments on the European tour, and the first few tournaments in January, February time were always a long way away, because you went to where the weather was good. So I think it was Thailand or Dubai and places like that. So it was sort of a 3 or 4 week trip. But it was all exciting and good, and it was what I wanted to do. But I remember vividly thinking, I turned up at the airport and I would see golfers, and I was in awe of all the golfers, because they were known players that had been around for a long time. And I was new to it, and I found it difficult. The first 2 or 3 months I didn't do anything like as well as I should have done. But probably because it was new and a little bit of pressure and maybe trying too hard in a way. But after 2 or 3 months, I think I'd played 8 tournaments and missed 6 cuts, so it wasn't looking good at all at that time. By April time, really, in my first year.
Yeah, and from a you're away from home and everything. In that, how was your mindset at that time? How do you cope with that in terms of you know your limits as a player and what you can do, and putting it together for rounds and in tournaments. Eventually, it comes because you do win on the European tour, you know, a number of times. But in that early sort of years, how did you go from them couple of months where it was a real struggle to then thinking, no, I'm capable of being on here?
Yeah, well, I don't really know why it turned round. I don't know why it did, but after 3 months, I hadn't done well, and then I went to a tournament in Italy and finished third out of nowhere, really. It was like I'd missed a few cuts, and then all of a sudden, I didn't just have a nice finish, I finished third, which took me mentally from thinking, I'm not sure I'm cut out for this, to immediately thinking, I can possibly win. And as soon as I had that third place finished, there was another tournament in the south of England called the Benson Hedges at St Melly, and I finished third in that about 3 weeks later as well. And then all of a sudden you are turning up to events thinking not about making the cut, but about actually being part of it and being around on the last day and you know, at the top end of it, really, which is what it's all about. But you're on the crest of a wave and you probably don't know why or how it happened. You haven't played any better, but mentally you're just so much more confident and you see the positives rather than the negatives. But through that season, that was my first year in 1982. I played okay, did well towards the end of the year, and you end up as the first year there's a rookie of the year, and that was between myself and Gary Evans, who was a friend of mine, and we got to the last tournament and there wasn't much between us at all, but again I managed to beat him on that last tournament and I finished rookie of the year. So that was a big thing in my first year, particularly having started the year badly, really. So that was the end of 92, and in those days you went into a bit of a break for the winter, really. From the end of October until the next January-February time you had downtime, whereas nowadays they're playing all year round around the world, but in those days there was a definite time to go home and think about, you know, maybe have a rest and forget golf altogether and then get back into it around Christmas time, really.
Right. And you know, I was actually looking when you got rookie of the year. I was looking through the list the other day of the players that are in there, sort of before and after you.
Yeah.
It's some list, really. You know, you're in good company there, Jim.
Yeah, no, I can't remember who they were, but there were some. There's always been some good players, some good young players. You know, at the time I was a good young player, and the following year I went on and did well. I won the Mallorca Open the following year in 1993, and things were going well. That was starting the Ryder Cup qualification points, and so I made a good start in that. Although towards the end of 93 I didn't play so well. I missed a few cuts and didn't qualify for the Ryder Cup. But again, 92 and 93 had been good. And then 1994, which was going to be a good year, and I'd started well. I was playing well. I had quite a few top 10 finishes, and then in June I woke up at the Irish Open with a back ache. First time ever I'd had a back problem, but I just woke up on the morning of the Pro-Am with a backache. I thought, well, this'll sort itself out. I'll go and hit a few balls and it'll be okay. But it didn't, and I didn't play in the Pro-Am. I had to actually stop and I had to come home straight away. I didn't play in that tournament. And again, a bit of physio, you think this will be all right, and it wasn't. And a month or so later, it was, I need to get this looked at, and I started having x-rays and scans and things like that, and it was a bit more serious a lot more serious than I thought. So I kept going for second opinions. I went for about 4 second opinions because I didn't want to accept what somebody had told me, but the bottom line in the end was I had to have an operation on my back. My vertebrae had moved out of line, so I had to have a fusion in the middle of 1994 at the height of, or when I was doing well as a player, and I was 24 years old, and somebody says, you're going to have a year off and have your back sort of realigned and fused, really, which wasn't ideal. But once that's what you got to do, you got to do it. So that was it. I didn't play for a year from the middle of 94 to the middle of 95.
It must have been one hell of a frustrating time. You, like you say, you're at sort of the pinnacle of it, enjoying golf, on probably what a lot of people would love to do, and then sort of brought down to earth by something that's relatively out of your hands and out of your control.
Yeah. No, it was not good at all. I was all right at getting my head around, somebody's telling me that I'm not going to play golf for X months, so I just know I won't do so. I'll read books, I'll have a walk, I'll gradually start to build up again. So, I would watch golf on TV if I could and keep in touch with a few people. But I don't know, I then started in the middle of 1995, I started to practice again, gradually, and I was never ever the same. I was physically probably all right. I was told that my back was good and there wasn't a problem, but mentally I was never the same, really. You just feel that. Did
you have to change your swing or your approach to golf in terms of training, or was there any sort of big changes that you had to make in that, or?
Not consciously, no. I'm sure, things had changed, so I was swinging the club a bit differently, but it was always in my mind that I felt like my back was going to break into two.
Right. Yeah.
I was scared of it. It did ache. The more I practiced, the more it hurt. And I had to do exercises to help it. And it was just a lot harder work than it had ever been before. Before, all I'd done is turn up and hit golf balls, and I didn't particularly look after myself. I just played golf when I wanted to and practiced hard, and everything was fine. But now all of a sudden I had to try and I had to manage myself better, really. And it was definitely mentally I just was never as strong. I don't know, maybe I felt a bit sorry for myself, but anyway, I got back to playing, and I played again. I never ever felt as though I played to the same level again, although really, strangely, in 1996, about a year after I'd started playing again, I won the Italian Open, and it still seems strange to me now that I can say that that I wasn't playing as well, and I didn't feel like I was as good a golfer, and I actually won a tournament, a bigger tournament than I'd won before.
Yeah.
But that honestly was how it was. Everything on that particular week seemed to fall into place. And I obviously played well and did well, and my score won the tournament. But even after that, I sort of wasn't convinced that this was the start of me being back to where I was. I just never felt the same. Didn't think golf was as easy as it had been before, really. Yeah.
And after you won the Italian Open, did you ever sort of think, well, if this hadn't happened, where else could have this taken me? Where else could my game of golf have gone?
Yeah, I never ever thought like that, really. I just didn't. I didn't have to try to not think like that. Because you've reminded me of it now, I probably could think like that and think that things would have definitely been different. But who knows?
Yeah.
But you've got to deal with what you've got, and part of being a sportsman is not just how good you are at the sport. It's actually the physical stuff, and it can be the stuff that's going on in the rest of your life that affects you as well, really.
Yeah, it's true. You can only sort of control what you can control, can't you? And
yeah, you've got to have everything in place at the right time.
I've got it in front of me here. I found it quite refreshing, to be honest. Whilst doing the research for the podcast, I came across an interview from 1993, and it said I think if you ask Faldo, Woosnam, and Montgomery, they started out at the same time, that money is my biggest incentive. With that today, obviously, as we move on through the podcast, would you sympathise with sort of live tour players now that move over into that for, you know, not just the money but a different tour as well?
Well, definitely. I think it's such a tricky subject, really. I don't like it. I don't like the idea of it, and I'm not in favour of it at all. And yet, if somebody came through that door now and said to me, "Is so many £1 million to come and play 12 tournaments a year," you're mad to turn it down. I don't think anybody would turn it down, really. Particularly the older players, and most of them who've gone on to it are probably coming towards the end of their careers, or they've got injuries. The ones that are a bit disappointing are the younger players, like Cameron Smith, who won the Open.
Couldn't believe that.
And, you know, there's a few others that you think they're only mid-20s and they've got years of potentially winning majors and making a name for themselves, and they've gone to the Live Tour. But I just don't like the idea of it, really. But having said that, if they want to take the money, that is fine, and it's up to them. But take the money and go and play there. Don't then be moaning that you can't get into
on particular
other events.
Particular events, And another one really where I noticed, obviously, playing against Langer, or with Langer and Seve. What were they sort of characters like, Jim?
Well, those two particularly were poles apart, really. Seve was massively charismatic and aggressive, as in, you know, attacking as a golfer. Exciting. You could play golf with him and you didn't really know where his ball was going next, and yet he seemed to always get it onto the green or round the green and hold the putt, and he would be, you know, in those days he was one of the top players. Langer was one of the top players as well, but in a completely different way. Langer was methodical and steady and not impressive, but he got his ball around the course in a different way. So, you know, you could learn from everyone, really. And in those days when I was playing, it's an easy thing to say, but you could speak to the players. Everybody got on with everyone. Everybody helped everyone. It was Faldo, Woosnam, Langer, Lyle, Seve, and quite a few other top players of the time that you could all learn bits from, really. And then gradually they disappeared because technology changed, and it was the metal woods came in, and they hadn't learned golf with the metal woods. They'd become top golfers with wooden woods and blades and things like that. And then the new technology, probably that was when Montgomery started to come through, really, and he took over from those players. And then other players came through who'd learnt the game with metal woods, and it was a different way of playing, really.
Yeah, I remember actually watching a thing with Nick Faldo, and he was saying he had to totally change his swing at one point. I don't think it was when that sort of happened, but it does have a massive effect, doesn't it? The different technology now.
Yeah.
Do you think that's? I mean, I'll be honest. In my bag, I've had to take a few out, but I used to always sort of carry a 5-iron and a 4-iron, and I think, why the hell have I got it in my bag? Because I can't hit it.
Yeah.
And then I changed to, I've got like two hybrids now, and it's I think years ago you had to sort of learn with what was available. There's such a wider range of things today.
Yeah, see, well, the game is easier now, but I don't think people are getting any better. I think it makes sense for people to buy clubs, and, you know, clubs are made easier to use. They're bigger, they're more forgiving, they hit the ball further. But I think because of that, people think that's a shortcut to playing better golf. I'm talking about an average golfer now. They think, you know, if I buy the right things, then I don't have to do as much, and it'll make it easier for me. And so I try and come up with analogies about stuff, really. And I think one that's quite a good one is that if you have a big garage at home, you park your car in the garage. Whereas if you have a smaller garage, you're more careful about parking your car. And I think the big-headed drivers, you stand there, look at it, and you think, don't need to do anything with this. It's going to do it for me. I'll whack it, and it'll be okay. But so I think people are practicing a bit less and not taking as much, not feeling that they have to work as hard on their own game. Years ago, because the equipment was so difficult and smaller and harder to use, you felt like you had to really practice a lot to hit it right out the middle of the club, because if it didn't come out the middle of the club, it went nowhere. I mean, you won't know those days, but honestly, if you ever get a chance to hit a wood or an old iron, the ball just didn't travel at all.
Well, a friend of mine who's got he hits a 2 iron, and I'm like, I mean, I know there used to be a 1 iron and stuff like that, but I've tried it a couple of times, and I'm like, it's just, out of my sort of range, really,
And the size of the heads, the big drivers, even when the first metal woods came out, the metal-headed driver was like a 3-wood size head, really. Yeah. It's got bigger because they've made the materials lighter.
Yeah.
But, I think a lot of club golfers, they're hitting the ball further for sure, but I'm not sure they're hitting it online or on the fairways. They're just hitting it further but wider, and it's getting them more in trouble. I think distance is overrated, really. Everybody wants distance, and yet a lot of the time you'd be better off being straighter but shorter.
Yeah, definitely. And that's something, obviously, this part of the podcast I wanted to move on to was, obviously, you've been the club professional here for a number of years now. So in terms of, obviously, teaching and everything, you've been involved with Lancashire ladies, am I right saying, Lancashire boys. You have obviously coached Tommy Fleetwood, who's from around these parts. So in terms of teaching, adapting from being a player to now into the teaching and stuff like that, how was that for you in terms of getting your message across, and how much have you enjoyed sort of changing it, still involved in golf, but changing it over into more of the teaching avenue?
I like teaching a lot. I think my way of teaching is probably simplistic and what you might call old school, but I won't ever go away from that because I think it's what works, and I think a lot of it has gone overcomplicated. I think a lot of these a lot of the data that average golfers want these days is beyond them, and it's not helping them to get better. It might be information about ball speed or carry or spin on the ball and things like that, but if you can't hit the same shot twice or 3 times in a row, it's irrelevant, really. You have to first of all learn to hit the ball and how best you can hit the ball in a consistent way. Once you've got that, then I think all these numbers then play some part in it. But I think there's a lot to be said for having your own technique. Everybody's different shape and size and build and flexibility. So, you've got to work with your own characteristics. Practice well. A lot of people don't know how to practice, really. But if you've got limited time to practice, you can practice in the right way, and that can help you. And it's understanding what works for you and then keep doing it, really. I think, as I said before, because there's so much stuff on the internet, online that you can look at and compare yourself with others and see what swing what's the technically best position, where do I need to be at the top, and all this sort of thing. People are trying to do things that maybe Rory McIlroy can do, but most people can't. They're not able to get into those positions. So I think work with what people have got and make them, or help them to understand what they've got and maximise their own game, really. And I think a lot of people are trying to be a pro, but A, they're not capable of that, and B, they haven't got the time to do that either. Mm-hmm. So, the teaching side, I enjoy it a lot, and I still talk a lot about those sort of things to the younger players. sometimes it doesn't. It's not impressive enough because people are impressed by data and computers. But I do still think there's a place for that, and I think sometimes a lot of people come to me for lessons who've been through that, and they say, I just want to go back to one or two simple thoughts. I don't want 10 things in my head.
Well, you stood over the ball as well. Yeah.
And you know, if you've got 10 things in your head this week, it becomes 15 next week, and then your mate says, try this as well, and then somebody else says, I wouldn't have done that, and did you know your left foot's turned out a bit? So everybody's telling everybody what to do, and before you know it, you're almost you're not thinking about the shot itself. But I do think, going back to when I learnt the game, I think knowing less was good in a way. And you know, it used to be a quality to get your ball around the course on a day that you were playing badly. That was known as, you know, he's a good player, or he's scrambled round, or he's managed to make a score out of a bad round there. And these days it's become completely about how people hit the ball, and he's impressive, but sometimes impressive doesn't end up in a low score.
Yeah, I remember playing board comp at my club with somebody, and he was in his 60s, always sort of 18, 19 handicapper, and we have a par 3 at Wigan where I play, and he hit the driver off the tee, and he said, I remember him turning around because I'd never played with him before, my pal had, and he said, it's amazing that, and he said, it's what works for me. He said, you know, he said, how many times, he said, do you see people, he said, ask the question, what do you think I should hit here? And he said, I don't know what do you hit your 7 iron, I don't know what you hit your 7 iron, or you hit your 6 iron. And I think sometimes people do tie things up far too much, don't they?
And I think, you know, I say to a lot of people, people can look at your swing and they'll say, oh, you know, that lad there, he's got a good swing. But it's the things that you can't see that make the difference, really. So you'll see other people with technically a poor swing, but they're a really, really good player because they've got these things that you can't see. And I'd rather have those all day long. I'd rather have the things that, you know, you'll look out the window there and you'll see a golfer playing, but one of them is massively determined, concentrating, choosing the right shot at the right time, has got a better strategy. And you know, people say, what's the difference between him and him? Well, that is the difference. It's that they've got all these things going on, sometimes naturally, but sometimes, you know, they're actually more aware of it. And I think, you know, about myself, I would say I had those things. I never thought I was a good golfer, but I thought I had really good strategy, and you know, shot selection at the right time. And you know, you could stand on that first tee today and you might see it as, well, today it's this club because the wind's off the left, and then tomorrow it's exactly the same shot, but you might feel like it's a different shot tomorrow because the conditions have changed slightly, or because you're feeling a bit different. And the best players would play the right shot on the right day. They wouldn't just hit driver because I'm on a tee and it's driver every day because it's a long hole. You've got to do you know, what is the right thing at that particular time, and not just copy what the player before you has done and things like that.
What would, for someone like yourself who's 3 wins we've got so far in the Winter League, we've got another game on Saturday, what would you say to somebody like myself who, in terms of setup, so if I get to the golf club sort of an hour before my tea time or 45 minutes before my tea time, how would you, what sort of little nuggets of advice could you give to somebody who in terms of maybe warming up for that round or putting them towards a strategy? Because I find it very hard to sort of, I might put 3 or 4 good holes together and then all of a sudden blip for 2 holes or... Yeah.
Well, I'd say 2 or 3 things, and I might say 4 if I remember the 4th one, but the first 2 or 3 would be, 1 is to lower your expectations, because I think all golfers think that when they had their best round last year, that's their normal golf, but actually, think about what is your average golf or what is your normal round, and that should be it. If your expectations are too high, the chances are after 2 or 3 holes you're going to be disappointed. So off whatever handicap, I don't know what handicap you are.
21.2.
Okay, so if you make a bogey on every hole, you've done well. So there's going to be holes where you make a par, and there's going to be holes where you make double bogey or worse. But you've got to expect that to happen before you go out. So if you par the first 2 holes, everything's good, but it doesn't mean you're going to par the next 2 after that. So realistic expectation is good. Dismissing that bad hole when you have your bad hole and moving on is good, and not dwelling on it. And also, for sure, warming up. A lot of people do that here, to be fair. They'll hit a balls for half an hour before they tee off because we've got a good practice area and it's a good facility. But if you could practice just for 20 minutes before you tee off, because not to work on anything, but just to find out your swing thought for that particular day, really. And as I said before, it might be that on this day I'll go and warm up, and today, without even thinking about it today, I'm hitting a slight fade. That's okay. I'll play with a slight fade today. I might turn up the next day, and for whatever reason on the range, I'm releasing the club a bit more and the ball is drawing today. But I've found that out on the range. But I wouldn't try and fight that. I would try and play, there's nothing wrong with playing with a slice if you allow for it. It's only a problem if you didn't play for it. So, use your warm up to find out what you're doing on that day. And keep yourself, when you're on the course, keep yourself in the game for as long as you can. The ball on the tee has done, as long as it's not moving, it's not in trouble. So if you have to go back to a 5-iron off a tee sometimes, or a 4-iron, or a hybrid, and lose a bit of distance, you've got to get your ball in play, really.
And one question that I really did want to ask, because hopefully this podcast is going to go out on the 15th of February, which will coincide with Netflix releasing, I've got it wrote down here what it's called actually somewhere, so it's called Full Swing, which is the same as the one that they done with the F1 and the Total Fly on the Wall series. So they'll be totally behind the scenes, obviously, with what's happened with the PGA and the Live Tour coming into effect. I don't know what you think yourself, Jim, but when these series have come into play in other sports, that sport has had a massive kick. The difference being with golf, although a lot of people would say, it's not totally affordable, it is affordable. It's out there for anybody can go and play golf. What would be the sort of advice you could give to people who've never picked up a club before, because I know I've got them sort of mates that would just go out and buy the most expensive thing on the market or not have lessons, whatever. What sort of advice could you give people who are probably going to be starting to take it up this year?
Well, I would say don't spend a fortune in the first place. I'd say golf is very difficult and you need to have a go at it, maybe with a couple of lessons and then practice. It's unusual for somebody to be good at golf straight away. There are 1 or 2 people who are, for whatever reason, they just take to it. But apart from that, golf is slow, steady progress. You get a bit better, you practice a little bit and you keep improving. You need to identify your mistakes. I do lessons now for relative beginners, and it is often that one person will have 1 or 2 reoccurring mistakes. They don't have 10 different things going on. They have, they either don't hit the ground or they leave the club face open. So it's just working on the 2 things that are key for you to be better. And honestly, understanding the game that might sound an obvious thing to say, but I sometimes will give a lesson in here, sat with someone, talking to them about golf, about what you're actually trying to do with the ball. And it works really well because you're not distracted by the actual ball or the club. Most people in a lesson, the next shot has to be a good one, otherwise it's like they get into a bit of a panic, or what happened there, what have I done wrong, am I this, am I that. If you're sat in a chair talking about golf and the principles of it, so your club has to go back and through and hit the ground. And if your body weight is transferring in the right way, that is it, honestly. Balance and body weight is such a big thing. So a lot of improving at golf is not actually about hitting a ball. It's about understanding how your body weight works. It's a little bit difficult for me to give you an example here, but most bad shots are hit when your body weight is too much on your back foot at impact. If you think of any other sport at all, everything you do, you're travelling forward. You're going forwards as you're hitting the ball, or as you're throwing the ball, as you're running, as you're kicking a ball. Everything's moving in the same way that you want the ball to go. And you've got to do that with golf. Transfer your weight from your back foot to your left foot, and then the club comes with you. So, without getting any more complicated than that is the key, really. But if you get off to a bad start with golf, if you get your weight going the wrong way, for example, you can't hit a shot at all. So you'll think, I don't like the game, I don't want to play, I'm packing it in. So how you start your first couple of months, and it's not about the clubs. Honestly, the clubs could be an old second-hand set, or they could be absolutely brand new, the state-of-the-art things. That's not going to be the difference between you being taken to the game or not. The difference is having the right basic technique to start with.
And I think a lot of people, particularly when I got into it, I sort of tried to practice and then just have the odd lesson every now and again, and that's helped me. I've been playing sort of 3 years now. My handicap's come down from sort of 28 to where I am now. I still have the odd lesson, but I think that is important, isn't it, to keep yourself sort of refreshed and just to keep ticking over, and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's a bit of a generalisation, but I think the people who I've seen for a long time and who've done the best with me are people who've had probably 3 or 4 lessons a year. So no more than that. It doesn't have to be every month at all, but just three a year, so that they're always on top of it. If it's good at the time, what's the next bit? How do I improve from here? If they're struggling at the time, get them back on track. You can have too many lessons for sure, and it gets too complicated and you get confused by stuff. But and then also it can be, well, actually I hit the ball really well off the tee. So that's not that part of the game that you need to improve. It might be your short game, it might be your putting. Things can be broken down into different parts of the game, really.
And one question that I did want to ask you, because obviously you've played in various different countries and everything, but recently, certainly last year, I managed to play some really nice courses, and we've been trying to do that where you just play a different sort of course each year, maybe something totally different. But if you could sort of pick 3 of your favourite courses of maybe where you've played as just turned up and had a knock or whatever, but not necessarily out on tour or whatever.
No, well, it's always a tricky question. I always think you're going to choose places where you've done well. But having said that, the ones that I would choose, if it had to be 3, coming to mind are obviously Royal Birkdale, because of my memories there in the Open. Another one is Woodall Spa in Lincolnshire, because that's where I grew up, and that is another brilliant course. And the one that I've been to recently, and I've been to it a couple of times, and I think it's the best course I've ever been on, is the one at Aberdeen, the Trump course in Aberdeen.
Oh, right, yeah.
Which is, people say it's good, but until you go to it, you just can't believe how good it is. So it's a links, the dunes are high, the holes are all separated by big dunes. There's multiple tees on every hole, so you can make it as hard as you like. But that is brilliant.
I managed to play myself at Turnberry last year, and we were lucky we dropped on with the weather. It was like, but for me that was when you said that, then I might have one that I might have got wrong in my research. But have you played at JCB? Yeah. What did you think of that, Jim?
I need to be careful. But no, I thought the course was very good. Well, I thought the condition of it was amazing. The presentation was amazing. There were too many blind holes. It was very, very hard and tricky. And, some bits of the layout I thought could have been better. But it's a new course, and I'm sure it will get better and better. But the actual presentation of it and the hospitality and the clubhouse, it's immaculate.
I was just going to say, I think that you summed it up probably perfectly there, because when I played it myself and managed to get on through work, and we went down and played it, but that's exactly how I would have described it. It was, the presentation's unbelievable, but I found it so tough for somebody like myself. The sausage holes in the clubhouse though were unbelievable, but so to finish off, Jim, I've got one question that I will finish off with, but the one sort of question I want to ask while we're here at Southport and Ainsdale is, can anybody sort of contact you on your website for lessons, or is it predominantly members of the club? Or
no, I'd say, well, obviously anybody can come for lessons. I'd say half my lessons are to non-members. Sometimes members of any club want to go to another club for the lessons. They maybe don't want to be seen with their own pro or on their own practice area. So, at every club, I think some members go to other places. But I think, I will do lessons for anyone. They can phone the pro shop and book in. My lessons are definitely different. It's about, as I said before, simple stuff, getting back to knowing what you're good at and knowing what you're not good at, and understanding how to keep doing it, and also the way you practice drills is massively important as well. Most people are getting too complicated, too much information, which is, I think, holding them back, not helping them in the first place. So anyway, if anybody wants to come for a lesson, please do. Yeah,
and you can, if you punch into Google Jim Payne Golf, Jim's website will come up there. So all the contact details and that. I'm sure there's other bits on the Southport and Ainsdale website, I would have thought as well, Jim.
Yeah, phone the pro shop at Southport and Ainsdale, or drop me an email, or through the website, whichever really.
Yeah, and just to finish off, there's a bit of a fun one. You've got a Texas Scramble, and you've got to pick 3 players from any era, modern, whenever.
Yeah.
I know that could be a difficult one.
Well, it is really. You haven't warned me about any of these questions at all. So thinking of it at the time, I thought I did well with the different courses. But I would definitely, from my era, I would definitely choose Tiger Woods. I've played with all the top players, but not with him. I think he would be also, at this time, he would be interested in answering any questions that he wouldn't have answered a few years ago. But I would pick him for one, and then probably other people I would choose are not golfers really. I don't feel like I would massively learn a lot and be impressed by golfers. I'd like to play golf with Sir Alex Ferguson, people who've achieved the highest in their sport. I think are impressive, and one person I did meet and went to a couple of seminars with, who was very, very impressive, was Sir Clive Woodward as well.
Right.
So all of those I know I would interview and listen to, and want to know how they get the best out of people and how they get the best out of themselves as well, really.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to finish it off, because I mean, like you say, you've probably picked 3 sports people that have always been at the top end of whatever they've done in their career. Tiger, Sir Alex and Clive Woodward, definitely. So, but I'd just like to thank you so much for your time, Jim. It's been a pleasure being down here. really enjoyed it, and I think I'll be nipping down to the pro shop to book a lesson myself. So thanks very much for your time, Jim.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Cheers.